Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to the channel. As you may have noticed, this is a new series for the channel that will only be running during October, and depending on how well it goes and how people receive it, it'll be built upon each holiday season, for as long as I can find interesting content for it. The intent is to dig into popular villains of horror, go a bit into their history, and the games that they were either slated to be in or were actually in. I mentioned slated as the first, and I hope the hardest one to cover that I'm doing today, because, well, this one has such wonderful sights to show you. That's right, we're talking about the Hell Priest, or as most people know him or her, Pinhead. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm going to refer to the character by its more popular name, which I know major fans of Clive Barker himself may not like, Pinhead. It's simpler, and it's how most people recognize the character. Pinhead is part of a race known as the Cenobites, which is a race of beings that indulges and is subjected to extreme torture to the extent that it's almost a religion, often describing themselves as
explorers in the further regions of experience, demons to some, angels to others.
Further pushing the definition that they live in a place where pain and pleasure can be muddled to the point to which it really blurs the line, which should come to no surprise as their design is modeled in part after S&M, which I am refusing to go into as far as this video goes because, well, I do know some children watch this channel. If you want clarification, ask your parents or look it up. Don't come to me. Clive Barker, in fact, took their design from punk fashion, Catholicism, and visits to S&M clubs in New York and Amsterdam. Pinhead specifically got inspiration from African fetish sculptures. The character was actually intended to be androgynous, with a feminine voice, further fitting with the more sexual undertones of the species and the character. You see, the character wasn't really supposed to have a main gender, much like angels are referred to in biblical times. Cenobites are actually created by merging two souls by being known as Leviathan, whom they actually also worship, and is also known as the King of Hell. Though you could argue that it's one depiction of hell, as the movies show that the Lamet configuration, which is the box used to open the doorway that takes you to another dimension, is home to the Cenobites. This could be hell, or possibly, and this is just me talking, another dimension where S&M has become so extreme that it's now a religion that it blurs the line between pain and pleasure to the point that the Cenobites, being the priests and priestesses of that religion, are eager to show any dimensional traveler the delights of the realm and what it has to offer. Delights being obviously open to interpretation in this case. Now, with lore like this, you would think they would have any number of major titles, and oh, how they've tried. So let's take a look at a few of these. The first is Hellraiser. This was a self-titled game intended to be released on the NES in 1990 by a company called Color Dreams, who you may also know as Wisdom Tree, a developer of many well-known Christian games on the NES. Yeah, I'm aware of the irony on that one. They acquired the rights to make the game for around $50,000, and it was used to use an improved version of the Wolfenstein 3D engine. And yeah, they were aware the NES couldn't handle the engine, so what they did is they came up with the idea of a super cartridge. This contained a Z80 processor, a programmable array logic chip, and an additional 4 megs of RAM. Holy crap, it's a limitation configuration cartridge! Now, for those of you not really understanding the logic behind my statement, this cart would have been capable of interpreting the NES processor's ROM and RAM access, so it could manipulate the video in real time. In short, it was another processor to work with the NES processing to allow panning, zooming, and fully animated backgrounds. This literally could have done things akin to parallax scrolling in 3D on the NES. That's inspired. Another method for doing this that they were considering was to build an add-on that would plug into the expansion port on the bottom of the NES. You know, that panel that no one ever used in the US and never opened or did anything with, and there were tons of videos made going, what the heck is this thing? Yeah, they were going to use that and pack it in with a cart, but that was actually going to be even more expensive than doing the super cart itself. Now, as far as the game itself, it would be focused around a character that was trapped inside the Lamet configuration, the puzzle box from the movie. The player would have to find ways to manipulate the outside of the box from inside the box, and solve it to escape, Changing the configuration of the cube on the outside would actually have effects on how the level and layout inside the box was portrayed to the player. The player would have to dodge Cenobites who would seek to stop the player from escaping. Once the box was solved, the player would escape along with the Cenobites, leaving the player having to reverse the configuration on the box from the outside in order to defeat the escaped enemies and win the game. My god, why was this never made? It sounds incredible! Sadly, the answer is kind of simple on this one. Money. The carts were expensive to make. Color Dreams didn't want to pay for licensing either, which made it harder to sell, as many places wouldn't sell unlicensed carts for fear that Nintendo would kind of slap them on the wrist and not let them sell any other game cards. Not to mention the game was going to cost around $2 million to make, which is pretty insane for 1990. The game was only ever worked on for a couple months and then quietly cancelled. The hardware was ready, the artwork was only 20%, and none of the programming had been done, leaving us all to wonder what could have been on this one.
Oh, no tears, please. It's a waste of good suffering.
Color Dreams would make one more attempt at making a Hellraiser game. While still having the license to the Wolfenstein engine, they sought to drop a Hellraiser game on the PC. This would have been a first-person shooter-style game where the player would navigate a three-dimensional labyrinth. The player would encounter random Cenobite forces, but before they could release the game, another game came out that you might have heard of. Doom. Yeah. Given the advancements in Doom, and how very much the actual story behind Doom, that being an invasion from hell, they really didn't think it was viable to bring the game out, since the two stories were going to tell a very similar style story. Not much is really known about this game other than it involved collecting a lot of charms and tokens, which sounds kind of underwhelming to me for a Hellraiser style game and not nearly as inspired as their inspiration for the one on the NES. So this one, probably best left on the cutting room floor, frankly. Fox would be the next one to try to take up the mantle of getting a Hellraiser game out. Hellraiser Virtual Hell. This was going to use the 3D Realms engine that at the time was being used by the Duke Nukem 3D game. Pretty successfully, I might add. The story revolved around a VR company that somehow tapped into hell. One of the game developers gets sucked into hell, and you have to play the other one who takes it upon himself to go in to get him back. This was a very promising game, in fact. They even got Doug Bradley, who was the primary actor for Pinhead, to even voice some lines and record some film for the game itself. Even better, if you made too many mistakes, you could find yourself turning into a Cenobite. However, though, the engine was hard to work with, and they really couldn't get the game moving and performing the way they wanted. So the design and the footage for this was just shelved. Yet another attempt would be made with Hellraiser Online. This had the basic setup of a puzzle that the player would solve every time they visited the website. Each time you made a move to open the box, another piece of the overarching story would unfold in the form of some clue or document. Solving the box in this case didn't win the game, it just opened up the main experience. Most of this looks like it was never released, though Morbid Match and Turn Into Trivia, those sections actually ended up on the main website for the game, but by this time the series had had so many failures in the theaters that interest had really waned on the franchise as a whole, and it was met with pretty minimal enthusiasm and just never really took off. However, this wouldn't be the end. Pinhead would finally make his game debut. Though not in his own game, he would be added as an extra killer in a game called Dead by Daylight. For those of you who don't know, Dead by Daylight is an asymmetrical game where 4 survivors try to escape one powerful killer. When playing Pinhead, you could use his chains and other abilities to harass and capture players before sacrificing them. The players themselves would be able to play with the lamentation cubes and stuff like that on the stage while they try to actually escape from Pinhead himself. Wow, this is a lot of attempts at trying to bring Hellraiser into the realm of video games, with some very, very good ideas along the way that just never really seemed to make it to fruition. Who knows how many more that there's going to be with a new series coming out on Hulu. But what do you guys think of some of these? Did any of these pique your interest? Are you happy enough that no one's really done much in the video game space with this particular villain? Let me know your thoughts on the games and Pinhead himself in the comments. I'd also like to take a moment to thank you for spending part of your day with me and taking the time to watch this video. If you could do me one more favor, please hit the like button. And if you haven't, consider subscribing. But until next time, happy gaming!